On my birthday, my daughter whispered to her husband, "I'll distract Dad while he drives home." The brand new Ford F-150 was sitting in my parking spot. I recognized it. I'd seen it in the dealer's window last week. $6,800 RS Marquette on the windshield. My daughter Janet had her ARM hooked around her husband Brent's elbow, both of them grinning like they just licked honey off a spoon. She leaned into his EAR, her voice low enough that most people wouldn't have caught it. "But I've been hunting since I was 12, and my EARS at 60 worked better than they did at 30. "I'll keep Dad talking on drive home," she murmured. You slipped that power of attorney into the side pocket of his briefcase. Once he puts his thumbprint on that nursing home form, the truck's ours. Brent squeezed the soft flesh at her waist. "Your old man's house has got to move for at least 200 grand. Add his monthly social security check to that. We can wipe out both our credit cards in one shot." I looked down at my work boots. The leather was cracked across the toes, the steel showing through in two places from years of kneeling on concrete GA rage floors. They didn't know those boots had walked through mud in 3 different war zones. They also didn't know that on the back of that nursing home authorization they'd sewed up, there was a fine print paragraph about my 35 EA, our retirement agreement with Lockheed Martin as a chief mechanical engineer. The kind of agreement that came with a confidentiality clause that ran 12 pages. Today was July 31st. My 60th birthday. I pulled open the driver's door, and Janet slid into the passenger seat before I'd even gotten my leg inside. Brent climbed into the back. She reached over and twisted the radio dial until country music blared out of the speakers, loud enough to rattle the REA review mirror. "Happy birthday, Dad. Are you excited? We've got a surprise for you later." I caught Brent's reflection in the REA review. His hand was already creeping towel, RD, my old leather briefcase on the back seat. That case had been with me for 20 years. The brass fittings tarnished green, the leather worn smooth as soap from all the miles it had ridden in the passenger footwell. He thought I couldn't see him. The first thing they teach you in the service is always know what the man behind you is doing with his hands. "Excited as all get out," I said, turning the key. The old truck coughed twice before the engine caught. Never been more excited in my life. I took the long way, hugging the coastline where the road curved along the bluffs. Janet talked nonstop. Did I remember collecting Sandala RS with her? When she was 7, did I remember what Mom said on her deathbed about taking CA of the family? Did I still keep my pension book in the same drawer of the nightstand? Every question landed exactly where you'd aim if you wanted to keep an old man's mind off his surroundings. I grunted along with her, throwing in an occasional uh-huh or sure do. In the mirror, Brent had my briefcase unzipped and was sliding a folded document into the inside pocket. He was smooth about it. Not his first time slipping something where it didn't belong. When I pulled onto the gravel lane that led to my house, Janet let out a yelp. "Dad, who's that Cadillac power kid out front?" I smiled and killed the engine. Could be a scrap dealer. They've been coming around more lately. I knew exactly whose Cadillac it was. Henry Caldwell, my old chief from the Navy, now the Deputy Undersecretary for Veterans Affairs. He'd called me that morning to say the Secretary himself wanted to deliver a birthday present in person. Asked if I'd be home. I said I'd be home. I pushed open the door, and Janet and Brent fell in behind me. Brent was clutching that folded document against his chest like a winning lottery ticket, his face fixed with that look that said he was counting down the seconds until he could shove a pen in my hand and press my thumb to the ink pad. He didn't know there were 3 men in M.A. Rhinecor dress blues sitting inside that Cadillac. They'd come in Henry C.A.R. Power kid half hidden behind the hedge. Henry stepped out first, a polished wooden box in his hands. He saw me and came to attention, crisp as a drill sergeant, and rendered a salute. "Frank, per regulations, it's got to be delivered on the actual date." The Secretary said you've renetted. Janet's mouth hung open. "Dad, who is this guy?" Henry didn't even glance at her. He placed the box in my hands. I flipped the brass latch and lifted the lid. Inside lay the Navy Distinguished Service Medal, a silver cross with an eagle on it, and beside it a letter on heavy cream stock with an embossed seal. The letter read, in recognition of Frank Miller's extraordinary contributions to the Sea Wolf program. The Department of the Navy hereby confers what program Brent leaned in, trying to read over my shoulder. I folded the letter and tucked it back in a box. Submarine noise cancellation system. The sonar are buoys they used in your high school oceanography textbooks. Half those internal schematics came off my drafting table. Janet's face went white as beach sand. Just then the back door of my own pickup truck swung open and a man in a DRK suit got out. He had a badge on his belt, the gold shield of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He walked straight to Brent and held up a sheet of paper. Brent Thompson, we've received a complaint writing possible forgery and attempted fraudulent transfer of a veteran's property. This is a CRCH warrant. Brent's power of attorney form slipped from his fingers and fluttered down onto the gravel. I bent over and picked it up. I turned it over to the blank backside. There, in a line I'd written weeks ago with invisible ink that only showed under ultraviolet, was a single sentence. I handed it to the agent. Mind shining your light on that for me? He pulled a small pen light from his pocket, clicked the UV bulb on, and swept it across the paper. The words glowed up in pale blue. To the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I, Frank Miller, do hereby voluntarily bequeath all my real and personal property to the Veterans Benevolent Foundation. Any third party claiming to hold a valid authorization for me is committing fraud. Janet screamed, Dad, you set us up. I leaned against the hood of my truck, crossed my ARMS, and looked at her. Her mask ARA was ST rooting to run. She always cried ugly, same as when she was 4 and dropped her ice cream cone on the boardwalk. Janet, your mother put you in my hands before she went. I paid for your college. I paid for your wedding. I handed Brent the STA up cash for that repair shop of his without asking for a single piece of paper back. You've run your credit CARDS to the limit 3 times, and I bailed you out every single one. She bit her lower lip and said nothing. That this little performance you two so kept up ST route last week, didn't it? I pulled a cigarette out of my shirt pocket, lit it, and took a long drag. Brent, when you went to the dealer to look at that F-150, the salesman you talked to was a kid I mentored at the community college shop class. He called me that same afternoon. Janet, when you hired that lawyer to draft the authorization, he used to serve as a JAG officer in the Navy. He called me too. I blew a smoke ring and watched it drift. You thought I was old. You thought I sat on this porch all day, ST a ring at the ocean, and waiting for the mailman to bring my pension check. Brent's face had gone from pink to the color of raw liver. You're a retired old man. You can't possibly have connections like that. Henry let out a dry chuckle. Frank's clearance level when he retired was above top secret. The Seawolf submarines he worked on cost $3 billion RS a hull. You think Lockheed Martin kept him on payroll for 35 RS to draw blueprints for fishing boats. Janet was crying now, for real, the kind of heaving sobs that shook her whole shoulders. She lunged at me, trying to grab my ARM. I sidestepped, and she stumbled, her knees hitting the gravel and T-ring through her thin summer dress. She looked up at me, face SMEA red with TRS and dust. Dad, you can't let them take us to jail. I'm your daughter, your only daughter. I crouched down so I was eye level with her. Janet, I'm giving you one chance. One, you take Brent and you walk away from here. The house and the truck, going to the foundation, but I'll split my monthly pension check with you. 50%, enough to rent a small apartment and keep the lights on. On one condition. She sniffled. What condition? You divorce him. Her eyes went wide. You want me to divorce my husband? This man tried to steal from your father to buy a pickup truck. I straightened up and looked at Brent over her head. If he'll do that, what do you think he'll do when the insurance payout on your life looks bigger than the monthly payments on his credit CARDS? Am I wrong? Brent didn't answer, but his eyes flickered left just for a split second. That was all the confirmation Janet needed. She'd been married to him for 7 years. She knew that flicker. She pulled herself up off the ground, brushed the gravel dust off her torn stockings, and took a long, shaky breath. Okay, she said. Brent's head snapped Tawa, RD her. Janet, what did you just say? I said okay. She turned to face him, and her voice was steady now, The way it used to be when she was a girl and she'd made up her mind about something. You took out a life insurance policy on me last month without telling me. Beneficiary is Chow South. Don't think I didn't find the paperwork in your glove compartment. Brent's lips went slack. He spun around and tried to bolt for the road. The two M.A. Rhines in dress blues didn't move to chase him. They didn't have to. The FBI agent stepped into his path and produced a pair of handcuffs. Brent Thompson, you're under investigation for insurance fraud in addition to the forgery charges. You have the right to remain silent. The cuffs clicked around his wrists. He didn't say another word. His face had gone the color of old grease that Janet stood in the middle of the gravel drive, a RMS wrapped around herself, watching the Bureau CA or pull away with Brent in the back seat. She didn't cry anymore. After a long minute, she turned and looked at me with something in her eyes I hadn't seen since her mother's funeral. A kind of hard CLA righty. Dad, she said, was that really your student at the dealership, or were you just saying that? I took a final drag off my cigarette and stamped it out on the heel of my boot. The salesman was just a salesman. I've never taught a shop class in my life. But the credit CARD records Brent used to put the down payment on that truck showed up on my bank alert, because you're both still listed as authorized users on my account. I got a text message the minute he swiped. Your mother taught me that, you know. She used to say the way a man spends his money tells you everything you need to know about his character. Janet looked down at her torn stockings. Then she laughed, a short, choked sound. Mom always was the SMART one. She was, I said. She saw you at potential too. She just hoped you'd find it before you hit rock bottom. I turned and walked up the porch steps. The wooden BOA RDS groaned under my boots the same way they'd groaned for 30 years. Behind me, I heard Janet's footsteps follow, slower, heavier. She stopped at the bottom step. Can I stay here tonight? She asked. Just tonight. I opened the screen door and held it with my foot. Your old room's still got the same bedspread on it. Purple floral. Your mother never let me change it. She came up the steps and stopped beside me. She was a couple inches shorter than me, same as always. I'm sorry, Dad. For today. For all of it. I put my hand on her shoulder for a second, just long enough to feel her flinch and then relax. Save your sorry for tomorrow. Right now, there's a meatloaf in the oven and a six-pack in the fridge. You can have the beer. I'm switching to coffee. That night I sat on the back porch with Henry, listening to the waves hit the bluff. The metal box sat on the rail between us, catching the last orange light of the sunset. 60 years old. I'd spent most of them keeping secrets and designing things that would never see the light of day. But sitting there with my old chief and my daughter asleep in the room upstairs, I figured maybe the most important thing I ever engineered was a second chance. The F-150 got towed back to the dealer the next morning. I never even sat in it. My own pickup STA route on the first turn of the key that day, and I patted the dashboard RD and told her she was a good old girl. She'd get me to the grocery store and back for another 10 RS, at least. Janet stayed 3 weeks. She found a job at the bakery on Main Street, kneading dough before sunrise and coming home smelling like cinnamon. She cut her hair short and stopped dyeing it that brassy blonde she'd been using since college. The gray roots showing through reminded me of her mother. She came over every Wednesday with a box of fresh rolls. We'd sit in the kitchen, drink tea, and not talk much. But the silences didn't feel hollow anymore. They felt like something we were both running to fill the right way. As for Brent, the courts gave him 2 years suspended and a decade-long ban from handling anyone else's finances. I heard through the grapevine he was changing oil at a lube shop over in the next county. Janet saw him once at the supermarket. She said he pretended not to recognize her. She said she pretended right back. Some things don't need fixing. Some things just need to be let go of. This morning, I got a letter from the town council saying they wanted to pave my gravel lane. Some Veterans Infrastructure Fund had put money aside for it. I wrote back and told them to leave it alone. Gravel tells you who's coming. You can hear every footstep, every tire. The ones that arrive quiet, usually the ones you need to watch closest. Janet called yesterday to say she'd file the name change papers. Back to Miller. She asked if I minded. I told her it wasn't my name anymore. It was hers. She'd have to see a RRY it herself now. She laughed and said she'd try her best. That's all any father can ask for. I reckon that if you're still reading, friend, and you've got a few miles on you like I do, you know what I'm talking about. The world's full of people who'll smile while they're picking your pocket. The trick is to keep your eyes open and your HRT a little harder than they expect. That's not bitterness. That's just knowing the difference between love and a con. Subscribe if you want to hear more from an old man who's still got a few stories left in him. Next time around, I'll tell you about a retired fire chief who caught his own son trying to drain his pension fund on a fake investment scheme. That one's got a twist you won't see coming. Hit the button, and I'll see you in the next chapter. The morning after my birthday, I woke up to the smell of burning toast. That was new. I've been living alone for 8 years, and the only thing that ever burned in my kitchen was the occasional pot of coffee I forgot about while I was out in the GA rage. But this was toast, black and acrid, and it was coming from downstairs. I pulled on my jeans and shuffled down the stairs in my BA reef feet. The kitchen was a war zone. Janet stood at the counter with a butter knife in one hand and a smoking piece of bread in the other. She'd set the toaster dial too high. Classic Janet. She'd always been impatient. Morning, Dad," she said, not turning around. "I was trying to make you breakfast. Didn't go great." I walked over and pulled the burnt toast out her hand. "You used it to RK rye. That stuff burns in half the time. Use the white bread for toast." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were puffy, the kind of swollen you get from crying yourself to sleep. She'd been in her old room with the purple floral bedspread for about 10 hours. I hadn't heard a peep out of her, which meant she'd been doing her crying quiet. She'd always been that way, even as a little girl. When she hurt alone. "Did you sleep?" I asked. "Not really." She set the butter knife down and leaned against the counter. "Dad, I keep thinking about all the things I said to you over the last few years. All the times I told you to sell the house and move into assisted living. All the times I said you were being stubborn and old-fashioned. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out the CA ton of eggs. You weren't wrong about the stubborn RT. I'm stubborn as a mule and I know it. That's not what I mean." She came closer, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I meant all the times I acted like you were a burden. Like you were just this old man I had to check in on out of obligation. I didn't see you. I saw a problem I had to manage. I cracked 3 eggs into the cast iron skillet. The butter sizzled and popped. Janet, you were a problem I had to manage for about 18 years. It's what parents do. You don't get a medal for it. You just do it and move on. That's the thing, Dad. You never moved on. You just kept helping. And I kept taking." She sat down at the kitchen table, the one with the scratched maple top where she used to do her homework. "Mom used to tell me I had a good HRT, but I don't think I do. I think I've got a HRT that just wants things." I let that sit for a minute while I stirred the eggs. The morning light was coming in through the window over the sink, the same light that had been coming in through that window for 40 years. I'd put that window in myself, back when my knees still worked right, and I could see a sheet of glass up a ladder without grunting. "You want to know what your mother said to me the week before she died?" I said. Janet looked up. She didn't tell me anything. She just kept saying she was tired. "She told me you were going to break my HRT someday." She said it like she was telling me the weather. Not angry, not sad. Just a fact. I ped the eggs onto 2 plates and slid one in front of her. "She also said you'd find your way back. She said you had her stubbornness too, and that meant you'd hit the wall hard, but you'd get up." Janet sta read at the eggs. She knew what I was going to do. All those years ago, she knew. Your mother knew a lot of things she never said out loud. That was her gift. I sat down across from her with my own plate. She also knew Brent was a weasel the first time she met him. She told me that at the wedding. Said she saw something in his eyes that reminded her of a used CA, our salesman she dated in high school. Janet let out a laugh, sudden and RP. She never told me that. She was being polite. Your mother was always polite. I took a bite of eggs. They were a little runny. I'd been distracted. But here's the thing, Janet. Your mother loved you anyway. And I loved you anyway. That doesn't stop just because you made a mess. It stops when you stop getting up. She ate her eggs in silence. For a while, the only sound was the clock on the wall ticking and the distant cry of seagulls outside. Then she put her fork down and said, "I found his insurance paperwork in the glove compartment of his CAR. He'd taken out a policy for $150,000 RS. It was dated a month ago. I didn't say anything. I'd known about that too. The insurance agent was a guy I'd played poker with at the VFW hall for 15 RS. He called me the day Brent signed the papers because he knew Janet's maiden name and he'd put two and two together. But I didn't need to say that now. She'd figured it out herself, and that was worth more than any tip I could have given her. The thing is, she went on, I almost didn't see a re. When I saw it, I almost convinced myself it was just him being cautious, that he was planning for our future, and he just didn't want to tell me because it would worry me. I made excuses for him. I've been making excuses for him for 7 years. You're not the first woman to do that, I said, and you won't be the last. She nodded slowly. But I'm done now. I'm really done. The telephone rang. It was mounted on the wall next to the refrigerator, a beige rotary thing that I'd refused to replace because it still worked, and I didn't see the point in spending money on something that did the same job with a screen attached. I got up to answer it. It was the bank. A woman named Brenda from the fraud department, whom I'd never met, but who called me twice a year to confirm that no one was using my accounts. She told me Brent had tried to transfer the down payment money out of my savings account the night before, after he'd been arrested. The transfer had been flagged and stopped. Thank you, Brenda, I said. You just saved me a phone call. She laughed. Frank, you've got more flags on your accounts than a 4th of July parade. The system practically lights up whenever someone touches it. Old habits, I said. I was a cautious man in my line of work. You were a CA rifleman, she said. There's a difference. Caution is fear, or CA rifleness is wisdom. I hung up and turned to Janet. Your husband tried to clean out my savings while he was sitting in a holding cell. The bank stopped it. Janet's face didn't change. She just picked up her fork and ate another bite of eggs. I'm not surprised, she said. He always was an opportunist. That's what I loved about him at first. He saw angles I couldn't see. I thought it was ambition, but it was just greed wearing a different shirt. I sat back down and finished my breakfast. The burnt toast sat on the counter, forgotten. After a while, Janet got up and scraped her plate into the trash. She rinsed it under the faucet and put it in the drying rack, right next to the mug she'd used. I'll go to the bakery today, she said. The lady who owns it, Mrs. Costas, she told me the job was open if I ever needed it. I called her yesterday before I came here. She said to come in this afternoon. That's good, I said. Mrs. Costas makes the best sourdough in the county. She does. Janet dried her hands on the dish towel. Dad, can I ask you something? Go ahead. All those RS at Lockheed, all that secret work you did, was it really that important, the Submay Rhine stuff, or was it just, I don't know, just a job? I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. The ceiling had a crack in it from the EA earthquake of '89. I patched it twice, but it kept opening back up. The system I worked on, the noise suppression, it saved a lot of lives. Submay Rhines used to be so loud, you could hear them coming from miles away. The Soviets knew exactly where we were. After my team's design went in, we could slide under their listening posts without making a whisper. That gave our guys a better chance of coming home. She was quiet for a minute. I didn't know that. I never asked. You never asked because I never told you. That's what I was paid for. But you know what? Janet, that project was impressive. It's a thing I'm proud of. But the work I did in my own house, raising you, that was harder. And I'm prouder of that too. She came over and put her hand on my shoulder. It was the same gesture I'd done to her the night before, but reversed. I'm going to fix this, Dad. Not the mariage. That's done. But me. I'm going to fix me. You don't need fixing, I said. You just need remembering. She didn't cry. She squeezed my shoulder once, hard, and then she let go and walked out of the kitchen. I heard her boots on the stairs, the creak of her bedroom door, the sound of the shower running. The old house made all the same noises it had made when she was a teenager getting ready for school. Some rhythms never changed after she left for the bakery. I went out to the GA Rage and sat on my workbench. The GA Rage was cluttered with old tools, cans of paint, and a disassembled lawnmower I'd been meaning to fix for 3 summers. I didn't see about the lawnmower. I read about the box in the corner, a wooden ammunition crate I'd brought back from my last deployment. Inside was a stack of letters. My wife's handwriting, looped and CA refill, the ink fading to brown on the thin, onion skin paper. She'd written to me every week for the whole 20 RS I was in and out of active duty. I hadn't read them in a long time. I'd been afraid of what I might find that I pulled the top one out and unfolded it. The date was from 1985. Janet was 3 RS old. My wife had written about her first day of preschool, how she'd cried for 10 minutes, and then made friends with a boy who Shaw read his crackers with her. My wife wrote, "She's got your stubbornness, Frank. She'll fight through anything, and she'll come out the other side just fine." I put the letter back in a box and closed the lid. Then I sat there for a while just listening to the waves and the wind and the distant sound of a truck engine grinding up the hill. Mrs. Costas called me that evening. She said Janet had worked a full shift and hadn't complained once. She'd even helped mop the floor after the dinner rush. Mrs. Costas said she was going to give her a permanent spot. I thanked her and hung up. Janet came home smelling like flour and yeast. She sat at the kitchen table and told me about the customers she'd served and how the oven was finicky and how one of the other bakers had shown her a trick for getting the dough to rise faster. She talked for an hour. I listened. When she went up to bed, she paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at me. "Dad, I'm going to be okay." "I know you will," I said. "I always knew." She smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in Yaris. Then she went up to bed, and I turned off the kitchen light and sat in the dark, just me and the ticking clock and the memory of a woman who'd been right about everything. I figured maybe I'd get up RLY the next morning and fix that lawnmower. A man needs something to do with his hands. And the grass in the back RD was getting tall enough to hide a deer. I wasn't ready for that kind of surprise. If you're still with me, friend, you know how it feels to watch someone you love pick themselves up off the ground. That's a better gift than any medal they can pin on your chest. Stick around for the next chapter. I've got a feeling things about to get interesting. 2 weeks after my birthday, the letters STA route arriving. Not bills, not junk mail. These were handwritten envelopes with return addresses I hadn't seen in decades. California, Virginia, Texas, even one from a Navy post office box in Japan. The first one came on a Tuesday. I opened it while Janet was at work and found a check for $500 RS folded inside a short note from a man named Charlie Dawes. "Frank, read the note in shaky ballpoint. I hear RD about what happened. Your daughter's husband tried to pull a fast one. My daughter's husband did the same thing to me in '98. I fought back with a lawyer and won. Here's a little something to help with expenses. We old dogs got to stick together that I didn't cash the check. But I kept it tucked into the frame of the mirror above my dresser, next to my wife's photograph." The next day, another envelope came. Then another. Within a week, I had 23 letters from veterans I'd served with, engineers I'd worked alongside, even a few guys from the VFW post I only saw twice a year at the fish fry. Word had spread. Henry must have told someone, and that someone told someone else, and pretty soon the whole network knew. They didn't send money just to help. They sent it because they'd been there. Every single one of them had a story about a relative, a son-in-law, a nephew, sometimes even a wife, who tried to clean them out when they got too old or too trusting. I read every letter, every story, and I STA root to see a pattern. It wasn't just Brent. It was a whole generation of people who looked at their par rent savings and saw a down payment on a house, a new CAR, a way out of their own debt. They'd been taught that their par rent's money was their money, and that waiting for a natural inheritance wasn't fast enough. The phone rang while I was reading the third batch. It was Henry. "Frank, you haven't cashed any of those checks, have you?" "I didn't ask for them," I said. "They just showed up." "I know. I might have mentioned your situation at the Rudderly luncheon." He sounded amused. "But here's the thing. The secretary, he RD about it too. He wants to make an example out of this." I sat down in my armchair, the one with the busted spring that poked you in the back if you sat too long. "What kind of example?" "Frank, Brent Thompson isn't just a petty thief. He's a symptom. The Justice Department's been tracking a rise in financial exploitation cases against veterans for the past 3 years. They're looking for a test case, something high-profile enough to send a message to every greedy son-in-law in the country." "He's already been arrested," I said. "They've got him on forgery and fraud." What more do they want? Henry paused. They want him to testify. They want him to roll over on the lawyer who helped him draft that authorization. And maybe the insurance agent who wrote that policy. They're going after the whole infrastructure, Frank. The middlemen who make this kind of thing possible. I looked at the pile of letters on the kitchen table. People I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, sending me their hot RDA reneged money because they recognized themselves in my story. If the Justice Department could actually do something about the problem, maybe those letters meant more than just sympathy. Maybe they meant change. Do what you have to do, I said. But keep Janet out of it. She's trying to rebuild. Already taken CA re-of. She's not a target. She's a victim. The DA knows that. Henry paused again. Frank, you're going to get some media attention. A local station wants to do a story. Are you okay with that? I thought about it. I'd spent 35 years avoiding attention. That was the whole point of secret work. But I wasn't doing secret work anymore. I was just an old man with a story that other old men needed to hear. Let them come, I said. But I'm not putting on a suit for it. The local news crew showed up 3 days later. A young woman with a microphone and a cameraman who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They set up in my living room, which hadn't been dusted in a month, and the interviewer asked me a bunch of questions about Brent and the F-150 and the power of attorney. I told her the story straight. No frills, no dramatics. Just the facts that she asked me what I thought about kids today, about the younger generation's attitude toward their parent savings. I said, I think there's good kids and bad kids, same as there's always been. But I think the good kids don't realize how much the bad kids are dragging down the whole reputation. And I think parents need to start having honest conversations with their children about money while they're still around to do it. Don't wait until you're in a nursing home to find out what your family thinks of you. That party made the evening news. I didn't watch it. Janet did, at the bakery on the small television mounted above the pastry case. She told me later that Mrs. Costas had hugged her and said it was about time someone told the truth. The attention brought more letters. This time, from people who weren't veterans. A retired schoolteacher from Ohio. A widow in Oregon whose stepson had forged her signature on a deed transfer. A farmer in Iowa who'd lost his land to his own brother. They all had the same story. They'd trusted someone close to them, and that someone had taken advantage. ISTA root writing back. Short notes, just a few sentences each. Keep your head up. You're not alone. It gets better. It was strange because I'd spent my whole CA career solving problems with math and steel and physics. Now I was solving problems with words on paper. And it felt just as important. Janet STA root helping me with the responses. She'd come home from the bakery, wash the flour off her hands, and sit at the kitchen table with a pen and a stack of envelopes. She had good handwriting, better than mine, and she had a way of saying things that made people feel he wrote. I watched her write to a woman in Florida who'd been evicted from her own house by her son. Janet's letter said, I know what it's like to be on the wrong side of someone you love. But you're not on the wrong side. You're on the side that's trying to heal. I asked her where she found the words, Mom, she said. I remember the way she used to talk to people who were hurting. She never told them what to do. She just let them know they weren't crazy. I nodded. She was good at that. She was good at everything. Except baking. She burned toast too. We laughed. It was a clean laugh, the kind that didn't leave a bitter aftertaste. That weekend, I drove out to the county courthouse to file the final paperwork for the Veterans Benevolent Foundation donation. The lawyer I met with was a young woman named Rihanna, fresh out of law school, bright eyes and a firm handshake. She walked me through the forms and asked why I decided to give everything away. I don't need it, I said. I've got a pension. I've got Social Security. I got a house that's paid for. There are guys out there who came back from the war with nothing. No family, no job, no savings. They need it more than I do. And Mariana studied me for a long moment. Mr. Miller, I've seen a lot of estate plans. Most people want to keep their money in the family, even when the family doesn't deserve it. You're the first person I've met who walked in and said, take it all and give it to strangers. I'm not a stranger to them, I said. They're my brothers. We just never met. She smiled and stamped the forms. I'll make sure it's done right. I left the courthouse and sat in my truck for a while, looking at the old brick building and the flag snapping in the breeze above the entrance. A few months ago, I was just a retired engineer with a leaky roof and a daughter who B.A. Rely called. Now, I had a foundation, a pile of letters, and a role in a justice department case. I didn't plan any of it. It just happened because I decided not to roll over. On the drive home, I stopped at the cemetery. My wife's grave was at the top of a small hill overlooking the ocean. I brought flowers from the grocery store, the cheap ones in plastic wrap, because she'd always said the fancy arrangements were a waste of money. I sat down on the grass next to the headstone and told her everything. The truck, the letters, the news story, Janet's new job. The way our daughter had St. root to smile again. You were right about her, I said. She's stubborn, but she's coming around. The wind blew across the hill and the grass rustled. I stayed there until the sun St. root to drop. Then I got up and brushed the grass off my pants and walked back to the truck. That night, Janet asked me if I was lonely. Sometimes, I said, but not as much as I used to be. Lonely's a state of mind. You could be lonely in a crowded room, or you could be content by yourself. She nodded. I was lonely for YRS. Even when Brent was next to me in bed. I was lonelier with him than I am now, sitting in this kitchen with a cup of tea. That's because you were lonely with the wrong person, I said. That's the worst kind. She put her tea down and looked at me. Dad, do you think I'll ever find the right one? I thought about it. I think you'll find yourself first. That's more important. The right person just recognizes who you are and matches you. You can't do that until you know yourself. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, Mom used to say the same thing. Your mother was a SMART woman. She was, and she knew you were the right person for her. How did she know? I looked at the photograph on the wall, the one from their wedding day, both of them young and nervous and full of hope. She said I made her laugh, and I never made her feel small. That was enough for her. Janet finished her tea and went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, STA ring at the photograph, remembering the way my wife had looked at me on that day. Like I was the only man in the world worth trusting. I'd spent my whole career trying to live up to that look. Maybe I finally had to. The next day, I got a call from the DA's office. Brent was going to testify against the lawyer who drafted the authorization. He was going to plead guilty to a reduced RGE in exchange for naming names. The insurance agent had already lawyered up. It was going to be a mess. But it wasn't my mess anymore. I'd done my RT. I'd stood up and said no. The rest was up to the system. I walked out to the GA rage and pulled the RP off the lawnmower. The grass was getting high, and I had a feeling the neighbors were rooting to talk. I'd spent enough time sitting around. It was time to mow the lawn and move on to the next thing. Maybe I'd fix the leaky roof next. Or maybe I'd just sit on the porch and watch the waves. Either way, IDA reneged the right to choose. You stick around, friend, and I'll tell you how the trial went. It's got a few surprises even I didn't see coming. Subscribe, and I'll make sure you don't miss it. The trial STA route on a Tuesday in late September. I didn't have to be there. The DA's office said they'd call me if they needed me, but that my testimony was mostly a formality at this point. Brent was pleading guilty to the reduced charges, which meant there wouldn't be a full jury trial. Just a hearing, some statements, and a sentence that I went anyway. Janet wanted to be there, and I wasn't about to let her walk into that courthouse alone. She'd been sleeping better, eating better, working hard at the bakery. But this was a different kind of weight. This was watching the last 7 years of her life get reduced to a folder of evidence and a plea deal. We got there EARLY before the courthouse opened. The building was old, same as every other county building in this RT of the state, with stone steps worn smooth by 100 years of footsteps and brass handrails polished by 1,000 hands. Janet sat on a wooden bench in the hallway, twisting a tissue between her fingers. She dressed fully, a plain blue blouse and a RK slacks. No makeup. She looked like she was going to a funeral. You don't have to do this, I said. You can wait outside. I'll tell you what happens. She shook her head. I need to see him. I need to see his face when they read the verdict. I need to know it's really over. I sat down next to her. The bench creaked under my weight. It's been over since the night you found that insurance policy. I know. But my head knows, and my he-RT isn't there yet. She crumpled the tissue into a ball. Dad, what if he looks at me and I feel sorry for him? What if I start making excuses again? Then you start over, I said. That's what sta rooting over means. You don't get it right the first time. You keep trying until you do. The courtroom doors opened and we walked in. The room was smaller than I expected. Just a few rows of benches and a raised desk for the judge. Brent was already seated at the defense table, in a cheap suit that didn't fit him, his wrists resting on the wood in front of him. His lawyer was a thin man with silver glasses who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The prosecutor was a heavy-set woman with a shy RP voice and a stack of papers that was about 3 inches thick. Brent didn't look at us when we came in. He read straight ahead at the empty judge's bench like he was trying to memorize the grain of the wood. His hair was longer than it had been, and there were RK circles under his eyes. He looked smaller than I remembered. Prison food and worry will do that to a man. Janet sat down next to me and folded her hands in her lap. She didn't look at him either. She looked at the prosecutor, at the judge's bench, at the American flag in the corner. Anywhere but his face that the judge came in. An older man with a bald head and glasses that kept slipping down his nose. He called the hearing to order, and the prosecutor sta root reading the charges. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft, conspiracy. It went on for a while. I stopped paying attention to the legal language and sta root watching Brent's shoulders. They were hunched four-way RD, tight, like he was bracing for a blow that hadn't fallen yet. Then it was his lawyer's turn. The thin man stood up and said his client was pleading guilty to all charges and wanted to make statement. Brent stood up slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. He looked at the judge, and then, finally, he looked at us. Your Honor, I want to apologize, he said. His voice was hoa rs, like he'd been shouting. I made a terrible mistake. I was in debt. I was desperate. I thought I had no other way out. I never meant to hurt anyone. He trailed off. The judge leaned four-way road. You just what, Mr. Thompson? Brent swallowed her road. I just thought Mr. Miller was old. I thought he wouldn't notice. I thought I could take what I needed and he'd never miss it. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Janet's hand tightened on her knee. I could see the muscles in her jaw working, the way they used to when she was a teenager, and she was trying not to cry. I'm sorry, Janet, Brent said, turning to RD her. I'm sorry I did this to you. I'm sorry I made you choose. I loved you. I still love you. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. The judge let the silence hang for a long moment. Then he read his throat and sta root talking about sentencing guidelines. Because Brent had paraded with the investigation and given evidence against the lawyer who drafted the fraudulent documents, the prosecution was recommending a reduced sentence. 2 years of probation, restitution of all stolen funds, and a permanent record that would make it NEARLY impossible for him to work in any field involving money or trust. The judge agreed to the recommendation. He banged his gavel, and the hearing was over. Brent was led away by a bailiff. He didn't look back. Janet sat still for a long time after the courtroom emptied. I stayed beside her, not saying anything. The janitor came in, and sta root sweeping the floor. The afternoon light slanted through the tall windows and made dust motes dance in the air. Then she let out a long breath, like she'd been holding it for 7 years. He didn't mean it, she said. He said he loved me, but he didn't mean it. That was just another way to get what he wanted. I put my hand on her shoulder. You saw it. That's what matters. I saw it. She nodded slowly. I saw it clear as day, and I felt nothing. Dad, I didn't feel a single thing. Not sadness, not anger, just nothing. That's called being done, I said. It's a good place to be. She stood up and smoothed her blouse. Let's go home. I want to make something for dinner. A real meal, not just toast. We walked out of the courthouse together. The sun was RM on my face, and the flag was snapping in the breeze like it always did. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt tired, the good kind of tired that comes after a long day's work. Brent was gone. Janet was still here. That was enough. On the way home, we stopped at the grocery store. Janet picked out vegetables and a chicken and a bottle of wine. She asked me to teach her how to make the roast chicken my wife used to make. I told her the recipe was simple. Salt, pepper, butter time. The trick was in the oven temperature and the timing. The mom never measured anything, Janet said, pushing the CART down the aisle. She just threw things together, and it always came out perfect. Your mother so ked with her gut, not with a recipe book. That's something you can't, Leah RN. You just have to feel it. She laughed. I don't have a gut for COO King. I have a gut for burning toast. Burning toast is just the first step. You'll get there. We got home, and I showed her how to truss the chicken and rub the butter under the skin. She paid attention like she used to when I taught her how to tie fishing knots, quiet and focused, asking questions at the right moments. The kitchen filled with the smell of roasting bird, and the evening sun slanted through the window over the sink. As I was washing the dishes, I noticed the mailman had come while we were out. A stack of envelopes was sitting on the table. I dried my hands and flipped through them. Bills, catalogs, a notice from the tax assessor, and one letter with a return address I didn't recognize. I opened it and read it twice. It was from a lawyer in Oregon, a woman named Teresa Montoya. She wrote that she'd seen the news story and she wanted to thank me. Her father was a veteran too. He'd been taken advantage of by his own brother, and he died before he could fight back. She said my story had given her the courage to pursue a lawsuit against her uncle. She was going to win back her father's property and use it to START, a scholarship for veterans' children. The letter ended with a line that hit me SQA in the chest. Sometimes the fight isn't about winning. It's about showing the next person that they can fight too. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. Then I walked back into the kitchen and took the roast chicken out of the oven. Janet was setting the table, humming a song I didn't recognize. That good day, she asked. Yeah, I said. It was a good day. We ate dinner together, just the two of us, and talked about nothing important. The weather, the bakery, the neighbor's dog that kept getting loose. It was small talk, and it was perfect. Small talk is just big talk that hasn't found its courage yet. After dinner, Janet went upstairs to read. I went out to the porch and sat in my old rocking chair, watching the STARS come out. The waves were calm tonight, just a soft crash and hiss against the rocks below. I thought about Brent, about the trial, about the lawyer in Oregon and her father. I thought about all the old men who'd been taken advantage of and all the ones who'd fought back. I didn't have any answers, but I had a full stomach and a sleeping daughter and a stack of letters from people who'd found something in my story that helped them. That was more than I'd ever expected from a birthday party. The wind picked up, and I pulled my jacket tighter. Somewhere down the road, a truck engine rumbled and faded. The world kept turning, same as it always did. And I kept sitting there, rocking slowly, watching the sky and listening to the sea. That was a good life. Not a perfect one, but a good one. And that was plenty. If you're still reading, friend, you know the feeling. The quiet at the end of the day, when you realize you've done what you could. That's not surrender. That's peace. Subscribe, and I'll keep telling the stories that remind us all of what matters. The last chapter's coming, and it's got one more twist before we're done. Winter came, EARLY that you are. The first frost hit in mid-October, earlier than anyone could remember, and by November the roads were slick with black ice. I spent most of my mornings on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the steam rise off the ocean and wondering if I should finally get around to fixing that leak in the GA Rage roof. I didn't fix it. Some things can wait. Janet was thriving at the bakery. Mrs. Costas had promoted her to head baker after the Thanksgiving rush, which meant she was in charge of the sourdough STA router and the EARLY morning oven schedule. She got up at 4 in the morning and came home by noon, smelling like yeast and sugar and the faint trace of burned flour that clung to every baker's clothes. She lost weight, not the unhealthy kind, but the kind that came from working hard and eating regular meals and not spending every night drinking wine to dull the edges of a bad mariage. We'd fallen into a routine. She'd come home, take a nap, and then we'd have an EARLY dinner together before she went back to the bakery for the evening cleanup shift. On her days off, she'd clean the house, or work in the RD, or just sit on the porch with me and read. She was reading a lot now. Novels mostly, the kind with happy endings that she'd always mocked when she was younger. I never said anything about it. People heal in their own ways. The letters kept coming. Slower now, but steady. I've become a kind of unofficial Clea ringhouse for old veterans who'd been through the same thing. Some of them just wanted to talk. Some of them wanted advice. A few of them sent money, which I always sent back with a note saying to spend it on themselves. I'd STA route, keeping a list of resources, a little notebook with phone numbers for the Veterans Administration, legal aid clinics, financial counselors. I'd copy it out and send it to anyone who asked. It wasn't much, but it was something. Henry called me in December. The Justice Department case was moving four-way road. Brent's testimony had helped them build a law-rigor case against a network of lawyers and financial advisors who'd been targeting elderly veterans across 3 states. The lawyer who drafted my fraudulent authorization was facing serious charges. So was the insurance agent. Henry said the whole thing might go to federal court, which meant bigger sentences and more media coverage. Are you ready for that? Frankie asked. More attention, more interviews, maybe even a congressional hearing if it gets big enough. I'm not looking for attention, Henry. I never was. I know, but you've got a voice now. People re-listening. You can't just turn that off. I thought about it. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to be a guy who told the truth. That's exactly what a symbol is, Frank. A guy who told the truth when nobody else would. We ended the call, and I sat in the kitchen. STA ring at the notebook full of names and phone numbers. Henry was right about one thing. I had a chance to do something more than just protect myself. I could help protect other people too. Men and women who were facing the same thing I'd faced, but without the connections and the resources and the network of old friends. I STA route, making calls. First to the legal aid clinic in the next county over. Then to the local VFW post. Then to the senior center in town. I asked them if they'd ever seen cases like mine. They all said yes. They all said it was getting worse. The woman at the senior center, a former social worker named Linda, told me about a client who'd had her house transferred to her grandson's name while she was in the hospital for hip surgery. By the time she got out, the grandson had already sold the house and moved to another state. She was living in a motel room with her cat and a suitcase of clothes. Linda said she'd been fighting for a year to get the property back, but the courts were slow and the grandson had a better lawyer. I asked for the woman's name and address. Linda hesitated, but I told her I wasn't going to do anything crazy. I just wanted to write to her. Let her know she wasn't alone, that I wrote her a letter that night. 3 pages, handwritten, because I still didn't trust computers. I told her my story, the same way I'd told it to the news crew and the DEA and everyone else who'd asked. I told her I knew what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you loved. I told her to keep fighting, because the fight was the only thing that kept you alive when everything else was gone. She wrote back a week later, a short note, typed on a Library computer, thanking me for the letter. She said she'd been ready to give up. She said my letter had made her feel like she wasn't crazy. She was going to keep fighting. She included her phone number and asked if she could call me sometime. That I called her the next afternoon. We talked for an hour. Her name was M.A.R.G.A. Red, and she was 74 years old, and she told me about her grandson and the house and the cat and everything else. I listened. That was all she needed. Someone to listen. After that, I STA route calling more people. Anyone from the letters who'd left a phone number. I'd sit at the kitchen table with a notebook and the phone, and I'd call them one by one. Some of them talked for hours. Some of them cried. Some of them just said thank you and hung up. But every single one of them told me the same thing. They'd felt invisible. They'd felt like nobody CA read. My call made them feel seen. Janet found me one night with a stack of phone numbers and a tired voice. She asked what I was doing. I'm talking to people, I said. People who've been through what we went through. All of them, most of them. The ones who want to talk. She sat down across from me. That's a lot of people, Dad. It is. But they need a hear from someone who made it through. Someone who can tell them it's going to be okay. She reached across the table and took my hand. You're a good man, Dad. I don't say that enough. You're a good man. I'm just a man. Good or bad. I'm just trying to do what's right. She squeezed my hand and let it go. That's what makes you good. Christmas came and went. Janet and I had a quiet dinner, turkey and mashed potatoes and green bean casserole. She made a pie from scratch, the first one she'd ever tried, and it came out a little lopsided but tasted fine. I gave her a set of baking tools I'd bought at the supply store, professional grade stuff that she'd never splurge on herself. She gave me a new pair of work boots, the same brand I always wore, because she'd noticed mine were falling. I can't believe you noticed, I said. I notice everything now, she said. That's what happens when you stop looking at yourself all the time. She went back to the bakery the next day. I went back to the notebook. The list was getting longer. I'd STA route, organizing it by state, then by the kind of help they needed. Legal, financial, emotional. Sometimes all three. On New Year's Eve, I got a call from Margaret, the woman in the motel room. Her grandson's case had finally gone to court, and she'd won. The judge had ordered the house returned to her and added a lien against the grandson's future income until she was fully compensated. She was moving back home in January. She was crying on the phone, but it was the happy kind of crying. I couldn't have done it without you, Frank, she said. You gave me the courage to keep going. You did it yourself, I said. I just reminded you that you could. That's the same thing, isn't it? Sometimes all we need is a reminder. She hung up, and I sat in the dark, thinking about all the people I'd talked to and all the ones I hadn't reached yet. The list was long, but I had time. Time was the one thing I had plenty of. Time and a good pair of boots and a daughter who'd found her way home. The new year came in with a rainstorm that lasted 3 days. I sat on the porch and watched the water pour off the roof, glad I'd finally got around to fixing that leak. Janet was at work. The house was quiet. The ocean was gray and choppy, the waves crashing harder than usual. I thought about my wife. I thought about the way she used to sit beside me in storms, her hand on my arm, her voice steady and calm. She'd always said that storms were just the EARTH reminding us to be still. I never understood that until now. There was nothing to do but wait. The rain would stop, the sun would come out, and everything would keep growing. That afternoon, I got a letter from the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. It was formal and official, typed on letterhead with a seal and everything. It said I'd been selected for a National Hour Road something called the Lifetime Service Cross for veterans who'd made significant contributions to the well-being of their fellow service members after retirement. They wanted to present it at a ceremony in Washington, D.C. in the spring. I read the letter 3 times, and then I called Henry. Did you have anything to do with this? I asked. He sounded innocent, which meant he was guilty as hell. Frank, I'm just a deputy under secretary. I don't have that kind of pull. You're a liar, Henry, but you're a good liar. I prefer to think of it as strategic withholding of information. You should go, Frank. The secretary wants to meet you. There are people in Washington who've been watching your story. They want to put a face to the fight. I told them I'd think about it. I told Janet about it that night. She looked at the letter and then at me, her face bright with something I hadn't seen in years. Pride. Real pride. Not the kind that comes from obligation. You have to go, Dad. This is huge. I'm an old man. I don't need a ceremony. It's not about the ceremony. It's about the message. You've been telling people they're not alone. Now the government is telling the whole country that you're right. That's important. I looked at the letter again. The seal was gold and blue. I'd spent 35 years avoiding the spotlight. But maybe it was time to step into it. Not for me. For Margaret. For Linda's client. For all the names in the notebook. All right, I said. I'll go. Janet smiled. It was the smile she used to have when she was little, the one that lit up her whole face. I'll come with you. I could take a few days off. You don't have to do that. I want to. I want to see you get that medal. Mom would have wanted to see it too. I nodded. She was right. My wife would have wanted to see it. She would have been standing in the front row, her hand on my arm, her voice steady and calm, telling me to hold my head up, hide at the storm passed the next morning. The sun came out, bright and clean, and I walked down to the beach and watched the waves settle back into their regular rhythm. The sand was wet and cold under my boots. The sky was the pale blue that only comes after a hard rain. I bent down and picked up a shell, small and white, and put it in my pocket. A souvenir for the journey. If you're still with me, friend, we're almost at the end of this road. One more chapter, and then I'll let you go. But I hope you'll stick around for that last part. It's at a view worth seeing. Subscribe, and I'll take you there.